The Trump administration may have handled the Epstein files matter badly over the course of the past year. But as suggested, this is boomeranging on the other side. And they're so bad at damage control. So to the extent they were trying to muddy the waters, they're getting muddier in the direction of the Dem socialists. Jasmine Crockett taking to the House floor to try to what about Republicans when it comes to financial support for from Jeffrey Epstein after Jim Comer went through the efforts made by Hakeem Jeffries and Democrats to solicit money from Jeffrey Epstein. And, of course, the other cozy relationships revealed in emails, Larry Summers, the Clintons. So Jasmine Crockett, fake eyelash of Spice, the social Spice Girls, takes it to the House floor, and she offers this.
Folks who also took money from somebody named Jeffrey Epstein, as I had my team dig in very quickly.
Her team.
Mitt Romney, the NRCC, Lee Zeldin, George Bush, Win Red, McCain Palin, Rick Lazio. I just want to be clear. If this is the standard that we're going to make, just know we're going to expose it all. And just know that the FEC filings, they are available for everybody to review. This is absolutely ridiculous.
She certainly is, as is going street on the issue. So it turns out that her team of super sleuths, and this is an officer of the court, remember, got it wrong. Easily identifiable as wrong. Lee Zeldin pointed it out. The Jeffrey Epstein he got a campaign donation from is Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, who is in no way related to the Jeffrey Epstein in question. Number one, Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, as he's listed on the FEC filings, Jeffrey Epstein, who is material here, not a doctor. That's one thing. Also, you can do things like look at middle name and middle initial and see that they're not the same. Also, in the Lee Zeldin case, the Jeffrey Epstein donations made to Lee Zeldin were in 2020. Jeffrey Epstein, who is in question here, died in 2019. But other than that, it's a great argument Jasmine Crockett makes. Can you imagine being represented by her in a court of law? Or in Congress, for that matter? Stacey Plaskett, the delegate from the Virgin Islands, trying to do her own damage control, per the Washington Post expose of her texting with Jeffrey Epstein during a congressional committee hearing with Michael Cohen, talking about the hush money case. Who should I ask him about? Give me names. And then she would dutifully repeat them. Stacey Plaskett, also an officer of the court, veteran prosecutor. She was using her veteran prosecutor techniques that were developed over a 20-year career.
I believe that Jeffrey Epstein had information, and I was going to get information to get at the truth. Having a friendship with him is not something that I would deem to have. And so I'm just looking forward. I'm moving forward. And I think that that's what we as American people should do, is move forward. If individuals are not involved in illegal activity, extending his criminal enterprise or his financial enterprise or all of those things, I think that we need to look at what people are doing moving forward.
Wait, let me just better understand that. What is that point? Because at the time he was a known sex offender and it had been detailed all the sexual abuse.
There are a lot of people who have done a lot of crimes, and as a prosecutor, you get information from people where you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Regular Clarence Darrow. Jim Comer was asked whether or not the Clintons, who he has subpoenaed, will get the Bannon Navarro treatment if they don't comply with his subpoena. He was asked by John Solomon over at Just the News about this. Here's what he said.
Mr. Chairman, there are two very important people that you subpoenaed early on, or excuse me, that you asked to voluntarily cooperate. They didn't schedule their interviews. Now there's a subpoena. But Bill and Hillary Clinton, if they continue to duck you, will you take them to court? Will you try to enforce a subpoena? Will you go the Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro route?
100%. We're going to go that route. We expect to hear from Bill and Hillary Clinton. Look, Donald Trump's answered questions for years about Jeffrey Epstein. Every day he gets asked questions about Epstein, and he answers them in front of the American people. We've subpoenaed Republicans and Democrats. Two Republicans have come forward, Bill Barr and Alex Acosta. They did interviews and deposition, and those were tough. But they did them. They didn't back down. Other Democrats have sent letters that saying they knew nothing about Epstein, which would hold in court if something ever comes out that they did know something, then they've committed perjury there. But the Clintons have never responded. They're the one group in this investigation that's never had to answer questions in front of a credible reporter, and they've never certainly answered questions from attorneys or members of Congress. So we expect the Clintons to come in, or I expect the Clintons to be met with the same fate that Bannon and Navarro were met with when the Democrats were in control.
Is this going about as well as they had hoped? I'm talking about the Democrats. For more on this, Andy McCarthy joins us, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Southern District of New York, contributing editor at National Review, and author of the bestseller Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Andy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, great to be with you.
I mean, there's the political angle here, the boomeranging that is happening, but one wonders, in terms of this renewed investigation, both by the Justice Department as well as by the House Oversight Committee, if any new ground will be trod.
I just have never really thought there was a reason to think that there's a lot of embarrassing stuff there. I mean, just as you've just pointed out with respect to a number of people, there's a lot of reason to be embarrassed about having connections to this guy, and to the extent that these people had these connections long after he was an adjudicated pedophile, I just think it's horrific. The congresswoman who said that prosecutors get information from anywhere, yeah, that's because prosecutors are investigating crime. So if you're investigating crime, then you have to deal with the criminals who were involved in crime to get information about the other criminals. That's why we get immunity authority. We have all kinds of other authority as prosecutors that Congress doesn't have. Congress actually can make sure that they're talking to, credible, decent people to get information. And when they're not, they can subpoena them and question them in front of everyone else. That's the way that's supposed to work. So, I think it's embarrassing. As far as whether there's anything criminal, first of all, the Justice Department and the FBI told us 4 months ago that they had done a deep dive through all their Epstein holdings and didn't think that there was any reason to think there'd be more criminal charges. And I've always thought, Dan, that, the Epstein case was brought by the first Justice Department. I mean, I know it was the Southern District of New York, and they're not in love with Trump, but I know that office because I worked there for 20 years. When you're trying to bury something, you don't indict it because that triggers all your discovery obligations. They indicted Epstein, then they indicted Maxwell. That's not how you act when you're trying to bury something. I always thought with respect to Trump that, that investigation in New York was run by Maureen Comey, and it was run at a time when the Justice Department was trying to make a case on Trump through Michael Cohen. So the idea that if there was anything there that was criminal with respect to Trump, that the Southern District of New York wouldn't have exploited it at a time when they were obviously trying to make a case. And then that the Biden Justice Department for 4 years, when they were throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at Trump, would sit on the Epstein stuff if it was that explosive. I just thought that was preposterous. But look, when you indict something and you trigger all the government's discovery obligations, the idea that you're going to be able to bury criminal evidence against someone who's a participant is illusory. And I don't think there's any reason to think we're going to see any more criminal charges. We'll see a lot of embarrassing stuff, but I don't think you're going to see big crimes here.
Speaking of Comey, not Maureen, but Jim, is the government's case against Comey imperiled? This week, a judge chided federal prosecutors, accusing them of some irregularities when it came to, well, discovery, among other things. Is there a possibility that this case is dismissed?
I think so, but I also think that the things that have caused a frenzy in the last 24 hours or so are not the big problems with the case. I think the biggest problem with the case is that the indictment is incoherent. I don't think it states a coherent crime. But this business about, the big story today is that Lindsay Halligan filed an indictment that the grand jury didn't see or vote on. And that's really not what happened. What happened was the grand jury was presented with a 3-count indictment. They approved 2 of the charges. So we know that they approved the 2 counts that are at issue. And then what happened was at about 7 o'clock in the evening, what Halligan did once she learned that only 2 of the charges had been approved by the grand jury is word for word, she put those 2 charges in a second document and had the foreman of the grand jury, which you're allowed to do under the rules of criminal procedure. You can return an indictment with just the foreman. The foreman of the grand jury was satisfied that the counts in the second document that Halligan prepared were the same as the 2 counts that the grand jury as a whole had voted. So he signed both documents, but they didn't try to conceal the first document. Both documents were filed in court. So the magistrate judge who looked at this did one of these rending his robes and the sky is falling kind of opinions that said, how could she have filed a document that she didn't present to the grand jury and they didn't vote on? And I just think that's much ado about nothing, because we know that the document that she filed has the charges that the grand jury approved. So, I think, as usual, people are getting themselves whipped up over something that's kind of a sideshow. The bigger issue is, does the indictment state a crime, and did she use, attorney-client privileged communications between Comey and Daniel Richmond? Did she use those in her presentation, and did she have access to them when she was deciding what to charge? That could be a big Sixth Amendment problem, and the content of the indictment could be a big Fifth Amendment problem. But I think a lot of this other stuff that people are getting whipped up over is, it's a lot of noise, but I don't think it amounts to much.
Well, I mean, but Richmond has the right to obviate privilege, and he admitted in a deposition, or he testified in a deposition, that in fact he was used as a pass-through by Jim Comey. So isn't that appropriate evidence to support a claim that Jim Comey perjured himself? I don't understand what's incoherent about that.
Well, 2 things. First, when we're talking about the attorney-client privilege, the privilege belongs to the client, not the lawyer.
Right.
So Comey was the client.
Comey was.
Can't waive.
Richmond was representing Comey.
After Trump fired Comey retained Richmond and 2 other guys to represent him, and Halligan had access to communications between Comey and Richmond between that date, which was the date Trump fired him. I think that's like May 9th of 2017, up until the end of that month. So the issue is, were those communications used in the grand jury presentation? And Comey and Richmond, whatever he said about this, can't waive Comey's attorney.
Yeah, no, I get that. But I mean, what about communications between Richmond and Comey prior to Richmond's retention by Comey?
Yeah, it's the problem that they have is that what the indictment says is that Comey, when he was FBI director, instructed somebody who was an FBI subordinate to communicate with the media about an investigation of Hillary Clinton. And in fact, they even botched that because what Cruz misspoke when he put the question. So instead of saying the Clinton investigation, he said the Clinton administration. So they have a problem with that as well. But the stuff that they have where they can show that Comey had contact with Richmond and then Richmond spoke to the media, the problem is that it either came after Richmond left the FBI in February of 2017. So a lot of the communications that people are pointing to happened after Richmond was gone. And the thing that people are most whipped up about, and I think this is understandable because it's real misconduct on Comey's part, is the handling of the Trump memos, which he communicated to the Times through Richmond.
Right.
At that point in time, Comey's not in the FBI, Richmond's not in the FBI, and the communications are about Trump. They're not about Hillary Clinton. So that's the problem they have. It's not that there's no misconduct there. I find this very frustrating every time I end up talking about this because it makes you sound like you're trying to excuse the things that Comey did, which I actually I wrote a book about this, so I'm not like somebody who has his head in the sand about stuff that Comey did. But the thing is, what he's charged with is not what you're angry about. You know, I think people are righteously angry about the way Comey handled Russiagate and about the way Comey handled the business with Trump's memos, which in fact he was almost, the attorney-client privilege stuff that we were talking about, that is in connection with the investigation of how Comey's memos were handled after he was fired. So it's not that there's not misconduct here, but the thing is, you have to, if you're going to charge someone, you have to charge them with the thing that you're angry about or the misconduct that you think you've identified. And here, that's not what they've charged him with. They tried to get him on something, so hyper-technical they haven't really explained it well. And the only reason they did it is because Trump wanted him charged, and everything they had in the way of his misconduct is stuff that the statute of limitations had already run on. So this is something they thought they could get him on because he reaffirmed testimony he had given in 2017 when he testified on, September 30th of 2020.
Right.
So they had this little piece that they thought they could get him on where the statute of limitations was barely still ticking. And the stuff that people are upset about, and I think rightly upset about with respect to Comey's performance, is all stuff that happened in 2016, 2017 that you're not going to be able to get him on because the statute is run.
Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Southern District of New York, contributing editor at National Review, author of the bestseller Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Andy, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
And Andy joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
You know what really keeps me up at night? It's the criminals feel more and more bold. They have no fear of any consequences because there are none. So I did what anyone with a family should do. I called Goldilocks. They're not just some cookie-cutter security company. Goldilocks has been protecting Chicagoland homes and businesses for 4 decades, 40 years. And they actually listen. Their technician comes out to the house. He takes a look at what you need to make your house a smart home with a security system you can monitor from anywhere. It's built